Hello and welcome to the web design tutorial. So what we're going to do today is create a website from scratch, and I'll go through all the steps. We're going to create a Bootstrap website, and we're going to work with that website we've been doing in class that was originally done by Neha, and I have sort of adulterated the design and made it my own. Okay, so let's start out by going into Dreamweaver here. I've already launched Dreamweaver, but you guys can launch that on your computers. And of course, after you launch Dreamweaver, if there's a big icky welcome screen here, you can close that off. Um, the first thing you have to do when you go into Dreamweaver is something called setting up a site. So you do that by going up here to the site drop down at the top and clicking on it and finding a new site. So we'll click on new site. We'll call this Bootstrap site, and then we'll go ahead and click here on this little folder to the right, and this will allow us to indicate where it is that we want to point Dreamweaver to, what folder we want to point it to, where we're going to build our website. Now I've already gone ahead, and I'm on a Macintosh, of course, so you can translate this to what it would look like on a PC. But what I've got here is in my documents folder on my computer, I've already created a new folder called bootstrap-site. So you guys can go anywhere you want on your computer and create a new folder and call it bootstrap-site. Or what's probably a better idea, I'll ask you to do this, is I'll go ahead and take my bootstrap-site folder, I'll compress it, and I'll put it on our class website. You guys can download that, uncompress it, put it somewhere on your computer like your documents folder or your desktop, although the documents is better than the desktop because it's less of a chance it's going to get moved. And then once you've got it there, you can use that to point to with Dreamweaver to set up your new site. So let's say that you've done that. You've gone to the class website, you've downloaded the bootstrap-site folder, unzipped it, and dragged it into some location like your documents folder or your desktop. Then you go into Dreamweaver, you click Site, New Site, you navigate to your documents folder into the Bootstrap site, you open it up, and you click Choose. Now when you do that, it's going to say whatever name you typed in here, Bootstrap site, and it's going to show a path to that folder here. Now, this is what's called setting up the local website. And when you set up a site that you're going to upload to the internet, you also set up something called the remote site. And we'll do that a little later on after we got our sites created. But we set up the local site here in the site section, and then we would go over here to the server section and click on this plus button here to set up the remote site. Now, this is where we would put in the FTP information to get to our server, and that would allow us to upload our files to the server so they could be viewed on the web. Now we're going to skip that for right now. We'll do that later on, as I said. So we're just going to put this information in that we did already and hit save. And what happens is it creates the site. It opens up your files menu over here, and you can see that you've got this site here, which is called Bootstrap site, and it just kind of shows you the path to where that is. And what you'll also get in here is an images folder with some images in it, which you'll have that because you'll have downloaded this from the website. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to close this up just so I have a little more room, and we're going to set up the actual Bootstrap website. So what we'll do is we'll go up here to the file drop-down menu and click on New. And then what we'll do is we'll come over here under Starter Templates. And let me pause this just. Okay, so let's see, I was on starter templates here, but actually what I want to be on is new document. So the starter templates will give you these bootstrap templates, but that's not what we want because there's a lot of junk in there. We're going to build one from scratch, but you can always use these to build websites in the future. But we're going to click on new document here. We're going to go over and click on the bootstrap tab. We're going to say that we're going to create a new, and we're not going to include a pre-built layout, so let's go ahead and uncheck that. So that's gone, right? So once again, you click on New Document, the Bootstrap tab, Create New, and uncheck Include a Pre-built layout. And let me draw your attention to this right here. Use Extract to build your page from Photoshop comps. Adobe Extract is something we've talked about, and I showed you the link to the tutorial on our website. That's a program that Adobe has that links to Dreamweaver that lets you cut up your Photoshop files and use them in your Dreamweaver web pages. So we're going to skip that right now. We'll talk about it a little later on, but we're going to skip it for right now. So just go down here and click Create. And so what's going to happen is Dreamweaver is going to create a web page and a style sheet and a JavaScript file and all the things that are necessary to have a working functional Bootstrap site. They're all going to be created. Okay. Now, if you get these little menus here, you can click on them to have them go away, or maybe they won't go away ever. Let's see, what does this thing do? Well, okay, maybe we're just stuck with them for all eternity. But anyway, these little annoying things come up sometimes, especially when you're first using the program, to show you different things that you can do with the program. And I'm going to see if there's any way I can get rid of them because they're annoying. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Click on this. Ah, there's the X. Okay. So click on this. So this is called the scrubber. This is the gray box that we can click on and drag across the screen to see our website in different resolutions. In other words, full screen here, and then we can grab it and drag it over to here to see tablet, and then down to around 400 to see what the phone view would look like. Okay, and then down here it was pointing to the preview button here where you can, it's called device preview, and that will allow you to actually preview this on real devices like mobile phones and things like that. Okay, so now we've got this this Bootstrap page here, and if we open up our Files menu and hit refresh, we can see that there's the Images folder that we brought along with us, but there's also now a CSS folder, which of course has your Bootstrap style sheet in there, and looks like it's locked. And we have a fonts folder, which has some glyphicons, which are images that can be used, and a JavaScript folder, which has some cool stuff in it, some JavaScript that we're not going to mess with, right? Now this is interesting, this little locked guy here. Let me see if I can unlock this at all. Let's see, unlock. So what I did was I can control clicked on it with the Mac, or you can right click on it on a PC, and we'll just hit unlock. And now that little lock goes away, and so we can use that file. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close this up. One thing that you may have noticed is we don't have an index page in here, which of course we're going to need. That's going to be our home page. And that's because this page, this is our home page right here in Dreamweaver, but you'll notice it's called Untitled over here on the left, so we have to save it as index.html. So we'll just simply go File, Save As, and we'll just name it index, of course all lowercase letters. It'll save it in our Bootstrap site because remember we set up that new site and pointed to that folder, the Bootstrap-site folder, and so now Dreamweaver knows everything's supposed to go in there. So we'll hit save, and if we go look in here, we can see there's the index.html file inside our main site folder with all these other folders around it. Okay, good. Now we're looking at this in live view. We can go in a split view, which is how I like to work because you can see what's called the front end of the website up here and the back end, the code down here. Of course, you can look at it in code view, which will show you just code. Now, one thing I like to do is go under the preferences, which are under the Dreamweaver drop down in Mac, and I believe they're under the edit drop down or the file drop down. I think it's edit on the PC. But we'll click on preferences, and what I like to do is I like to go to fonts and code view and change this to the largest font. And this is for your benefit, so you can see the code very well and big in here. Okay, so that's showing us our code, but I'll go back to the split view here so we can see things happen up here on the front end of the website while we make changes to the code. Notice that when you have your index page showing, this button up here is lit up. It's called the source code. That's referred to the index.html page. When you're looking at that code, it's called the source code. You also have these other links over here. You can click to the right of that on bootstrap.css, and now you'll see the CSS web page. That's our style sheet. And of course, here's a couple of JavaScript files, which are just scary. This one is especially scary. It's giving me kind of a nosebleed right now. So we're not going to pay attention to those because that JavaScript was already written and this class doesn't cover it, and we would never want to because look at that stuff. It's insane. Okay, so we'll go back here to our source code. And now what we're going to do is what we've already done in class. We've actually done all this so far in class, but we're just starting from scratch again, is we're going to enable the Bootstrap components over here and use those drop-in components to start to build a web page. So over here on the files, or on this toolbox over here, the insert toolbox, if we click here on this insert icon, the second one down, it'll give you these drop-down menus of all the things you can insert. And so right now it says HTML. These are HTML things you can insert. But we'll go ahead and change that to Bootstrap components. And these are all the Bootstrap components we can insert. So we're going to use this to put in our container, our grid rows, our nav bar, and so on and so forth. Notice there's a bunch of other stuff that you can drop in here, you know, as you learn more or want to investigate and experiment with some of this stuff. These are some of the main functions of web design websites that you can do. Things like accordion boxes which open up, or tabs, things like lists, list groups, input groups for forms, buttons. You've got all kinds of sliders and things over here that you can do, including galleries, but we're going to skip all that stuff right now and just put in some of the key components that we need to make this website. So before we put anything in, we're going to have to pay a little attention once again to the structure of the HTML code here. So I'm going to go to the code view. Remember, we talked about HTML earlier in the semester, and that these things that are surrounded by these things which are called angle brackets. This is the beginning angle bracket over here. This is the end angle bracket over here. And anything that is surrounded by those is called a tag, T-A-G. And the tags are the basic building blocks of HTML, which is a formatting language. And so all these little tags get put around the HTML page, and they format the page so that you can then put content in it. That's the purpose of the HTML page. And then, of course, the CSS, cascading style sheet page, in this case bootstrap.css, does all the design, all the color, the shape and size of the divs, whether there's images in there, things like that. A lot of that stuff's going to happen in the Bootstrap file. So here we have the doc type tag, which declares this page to be an HTML page. And then we have the HTML page with language of English here. And remember that these tags generally come in pairs. The doc type tag is one of the few that it doesn't have a matching pair, but the HTML tag does. This HTML tag says here's where the HTML starts. This one down at the end with a /, which always means end, says that the HTML ends down here. So once again, we're telling the computer that's reading this, hey, you're hitting an HTML page. Here's where the HTML starts. Here's where it ends, right? Now then, once you've declared the type of document it is and that you've begun and ended the HTML in these two locations, the web page is essentially divided up into two sections. The head section, which is defined by a begin head tag and an end head tag, and the body section, which is defined by a begin body tag and an end body tag. Now I've compared this to a term paper that you might write, they might type up in something like Microsoft Word, where the head section would be something like, up in the top right corner you might put your name, the name of the class, the name of the professor, you know, what date it is, the name of the assignment, things like that. So the head section goes up at the top, and that's stuff for the professor to read. It's not actually the content of the paper, of your term paper, right? Here, in this case, with a web page, whatever occurs between the begin head tag and the end head tag, this is for computers to read. The general public doesn't see any of this information, with the exception of the title tag, which is right here, which shows you the title of your web page right up at the top. So if I wanted to title this, I could just highlight that untitled document and type Bootstrap site or something like that. I could also, you know, put it in some other locations, but we'll just leave it there for right now. So that's going to show up at the top of the page when we look at it in a browser. Now all this other stuff in here This is all information for the computer. So there's some things called meta tags. This tells you the format of the character set, which is of course the alphabet that's being used for this web page. It's UTF-8, which is Latin-based English with some special characters like umlauts and French and Spanish accents, things like that. This information here just gives the computer some information about the coding language that's being used. This gives you some information about the browser. And then of course we have our title tag. And then here, this is the actual link which links to the style sheet. So you can see the word link in here. And href means it's a reference. In other words, it's pointing to something. And what it's pointing to is it's pointing to the CSS folder and then a file called bootstrap.css, this file up here, which of course is a style sheet. And then sure enough, if we look in here, our index page is right out here in the main folder. And then in order to get down into another folder, you have to put a /. And so it wants to go into, it says, hey, this is an HTML web page, but I need to link to this style sheet in order for you to see all the styles. So we say, hey, we're right here, we're the index page, right? But we're going to go into the CSS folder, so we write CSS, right? And then we put a /, which means go inside the CSS folder and look for the bootstrap.css file. And that's going to have all our styles that are appropriate for this web page. Now, of course, everything in gray here is what's called a comment. That is informing you of what's going on and giving you some little tips. Down here we have the end head tag, which means we're done with this head section. And then we get into the body tags here. Once again, the body is like the meat and potatoes of the term paper. That's the content. So everything that shows up on your website is between the begin body tag and the end body tag. That's the only content that people see. It's what you call the front end of the website. Now all we have in here right now are a couple of links to JavaScript files, these JavaScript files in particular. Once again, they link to a folder here in the main directory called JS JavaScript, and then those are the files. So there's also here in the body some comments here that tell you what these scripts do, but basically you just leave those scripts down at the bottom of your page and be done with them, right? So that's our a review of basic structure of the HTML page. Now, the reason that we talked about that was because it never hurts to go over the basics, but also to point out that your web page. Remember, I said everything that you're going to see on the front end of the web page is going to exist between these two tags, which means when you start making your web page, you should literally start right after this body tag. So you go ahead and click your mouse right here after the word body, hit your enter button to go to the next line. And this, of course, is where we're going to drop in our first div, div, of course, which is short for division. And a division is just like a box. It's like a rectangle, a flexible rectangle that we can use CSS to tell to be any size we want. And that's how web pages are built with these divs. So, of course, the first div we're going to drop in is going to be a container. A container div is the master div that goes around the entire website. So we're going to open up our we're not going to open up that. That was just a test and you failed miserably. Well, actually I failed miserably, and if you followed along you did too. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the insert menu here. We'll look at our Bootstrap container, and what we want to do is we want to drop in this container component here. So we're going to go ahead and click on this, and it's going to drop in a div tag and an end div tag, right? And it's also going to drop in a class called container. Now, once again, when you make divs on your HTML web page, these boxes which define your website, you can give them names that link to styles on your style sheet. In this case, since these components are sort of pre-built, what happens is when you insert one, it inserts some HTML code here on the web page, but that HTML code ties in to pre-existing code on the bootstrap.css page. So in other words, all of these components that you see here, all the CSS that powers those, that makes them work and makes them look good, it's already written into the style sheet. Any functionality is already written into the JavaScript. So it's like a library up here. In fact, JavaScript is often referred to JavaScript libraries, libraries of information that power functions. So what's going to happen is there's a class, which is a type of style that can be used over and over again, called container in bootstrap.css, and it's already defined all the parameters for your container. So by just dropping this code in here, Dreamweaver is saying, okay, you want a container? Well, we've already figured that out for you what it's going to look like. So we'll just go ahead and put that in there and we'll be good, right? Now, if we go back to the split screen view here, you can see that this little blue line, this rectangle, defines the container itself. We also get this label here, which will let us do things like we can add classes and we can click, I think we can control click on this. Let me see if this works. Yeah, if we control click on the words, the class name here, we can go to code and then click on .container. And what that does is it goes to the Bootstrap CSS file, and it will show us some of the code for the container, right? And if you notice, if we go back to the source code here, there's a whole bunch of sections. And once again, I'm control clicking on a Mac or right clicking on a PC. Notice that there's a ton of different styles that have the word container in them. The ones that we went to were certain container styles, and if we clicked here on another one, it would show us what container style that is. And you can even roll over these and it'll tell you what they are. You can see that this style right here that I'm rolled over here, it's the container definition for a web page which is being viewed at a width of under 1200 pixels. The min width of 1200 pixels, which is the minimum width. So that's like for a desktop. That would be the definition of a desktop web page, right? This one, which is 992, would also be what I would consider a large desktop. 768 would be a tablet, and then a smaller one might be defined in this here. So you might have to hunt around. What I'm telling you is that when you have the name of a class, like a style here, there might be multiple instances of that on the CSS sheet, and you might have to sort of hunt around to find the one that you want. Okay, so we've got our container there, and so one thing we could do, we could spend all day like hunting around trying to figure out where this stuff is, or we can sort of temporarily make our own code to help us identify what's going on here. So I'm going to go for the latter option because I don't really want to jump through all the hoops to try and find this stuff. Well, actually, let me jump through one hoop and see if it works out. If it does, great. If not, we'll just move on. So I'm going to go down to this fourth one here, which was the largest one. I'm going to click on that and go to that code. So it shows me container mid-width 1200 pixels, and the width of that container is 1170, right? So let's just try an experiment here. I'm going to click at the end of this line and hit my enter button. I'm on the style sheet now, and I'm going to type the words background color, a colon, and I'm just going to say yellow, and then semicolon. Now, if I go back here to my source code, sure enough, you'll see that this box turned yellow. Okay, which tells me that I did in fact find the right code for making changes to the style sheet for this width. You can see that this width is actually beyond 1200 pixels. Here's the 1200 pixels marker here. These are the rulers up here that you can use to define your different websites for the different media, like the computer, desktop, the tablet, and the phone. So you can see that this is wider than 1200 pixels, so it has a min width of at least 1200. So that's what we were looking at in the CSS code, so that made it yellow. Now this will be interesting. Let's see what happens if we notice how when we take it down to the tablet size, it's not yellow because that was a different style altogether that defined that. That's what responsive web design is. It means that you can put in different styles for the different type of devices. So the computer reads the browser, and when the browser gets to be a certain width, in other words, it's powering a phone or a tablet or a desktop, then it will show certain information. So, okay, so make sure you do what I just did to go ahead and put that yellow in. And now we've got our div with a yellow background, which will help us see it and figure out what's what, right? Now I'm going to go down here in the source code, and I'm going to click between the beginning and the end tags. And whenever I say that, I mean that this is the beginning div tag here, and this is the ending div tag with the forward slash. So I'm going to click between those two tags, and I'm going to hit my enter button a couple times to make some space in here. Now, one of the things we do in code is we do indentations. And we indent by hitting your tab key to show that this code here is inside of this code here. In other words, we're nesting divs. We're putting boxes within boxes like little Russian nesting dolls. So everything, the container is the master div that goes around your whole website, which means everything else has to go inside of it. So we go right after the start div tag, we tab in, and now we're going to insert our next thing, right? So the next thing we're going to insert here on the insert button, we're going to insert a grid row with columns. So we're going to click on that. It's going to ask us how many columns we want. If it says before or after nest, you can just click after. That's always fine. Let's just put in one column here and hit OK. Alright, so what happens? Inside of our div tag here, it inserts another div, which is this one here called row. And that's the beginning div tag, and here's the ending div tag for that. Now, in order for this to be properly tabbed in, I'm going to have to click before this beginning div tag and hit my tab key. Now you can see that if I go down here, I'm just trying to clean things up a little bit, and it's not working out too well. Okay, there we go. So here's your container. It starts right here, and see, imagine you drew a vertical line to the left of this div tag and went all the way down to here. So that's what you're trying to accomplish with this tabbing. You're trying to say everything that starts here ends here at the same place if you drew a vertical line. Same down here. You tab in, which says that this content is inside of the outer content, and you say that this row starts here and then it ends here, right? And then you tab in again, and this shows that we have one more nested div, which is this div right here with a class of call large 12, right? So what happens is it created a row, and it put inside of that row, which goes all the way across the page there, it put in another div which would allow you to define how many sections you want this internal div to be divided up into. Now remember when I told you in class that the way that Bootstrap works is it takes every row, and of course a row is just a row that goes all the way across the page inside of the container, and it allows you to divide it up into however many sections you want based on a grid that has 12 divisions in it going horizontally across. So in other words, there's the potential for 12 different sections to go across this row. You can have 12 little boxes there if you want. But what I said was, you remember when we inserted this grid row, I said I just wanted one big row, which means that we're going to have a row with 12 columns in it, right? So that's why it's called column large 12, because it's literally, this row is taking up all 12 of these sort of invisible columns that you can imagine going all the way across the web page like that, right? Out these columns here, right? And notice that it put in column large 12, right? Well, that's fine. We'll be able to work with that just fine. What I did notice over here is I made a mistake a little earlier. It's really easy to fix, and I'll explain what I did. When we dropped in that first div, which was class container, we did that with this insert tag here. Notice that there's two tags here, container and container fluid. Well, a container will give you what's called a fixed width size web page, which will be a web page of a certain length, but a container fluid will give you a web page that will resize. And so that's actually what we wanted. But fortunately for us, all we have to do is change this class here from container to container-fluid, and we'll get all of the benefits of that fluid container, which will resize. Because once again, remember that I told you that everything already exists here on the Bootstrap CSS style sheet. So go ahead and do that. Now you will notice one thing though, our yellow box changed, right? Because that was a style that we put in for just the regular container, right? So if I go over here over container fluid and then control click on this, go to code, we can go to click here on container fluid. That will take us down to that, right? And now what we can do is, once again, we can put in a yellow background here. So what I'm going to do is go to the end of this last line in the container fluid section, hit my return key. Notice when you do that, you get this thing called code hints, and this is a pop-up menu of all the different codes that you can use. If you hit the letter that begins the code you think you want to use, like for example, hit the letter B as in background, it will jump down to the B's, and we can double click on this style here, background color. We can double click on, go ahead and click there. We can double click on the word color, and then get a color picker here where we can choose a color that we want. I'm going to go ahead and choose this yellow here and then hit our enter button. It'll show us the number as what's called a hexadecimal number, which is a combination of letters and numbers with a hashtag in front of it, which indicates the computer what color is. It's a shade of yellow. And then of course you end every style in your style sheet with a semicolon, which is the terminator, tells that code that it's done, right? So go ahead and type that in, and now you can see that we have a yellow background. But what's interesting about the fluid container is that because it's fluid, that means it keeps that style as it resizes. So you see that the container actually will stay yellow the whole time, whereas that regular container that we used before, the fixed width container, didn't. Okay, so now's a good time to save your work. You can just go File, Save All. That will save your index page and your style sheet and any other files that you've edited. Notice that when you've made changes to a page, like for example our bootstrap, there's a little asterisk that appears here. What that means is you made a change but you haven't saved it yet. And same for this index page, there's an asterisk there meaning that we've made a change but we haven't saved it. But if we go File, Save All, it will save everything and those asterisks will go away. Okay, so once again we can go back here to our, let's go to our split view, let's stay in our split view and go to source code here so that we're back into the HTML web page that we're building, right? Now, inside of this top div is where we're going to put our header information. And what we can do is we can insert what's called a responsive image. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. What we want to do is insert a responsive image into this div right here, which would be the header image that Neha has already prepared for us. But before we do that, the header image has basically an orange look to it, right? So what I think I want to do is I want to go ahead and give an orange background to the div itself so that the orange header that sits in there looks a little better on that background. So what I can do is, notice that there's a class here for this div defined as call large 12, right? And that's, you know, the existing CSS style. But we can make our own styles and we can add them to these styles here and then put in even more specifics about how we want our web page to look. So what we'll do is we'll go over here to the bootstrap.css, the style sheet here. We'll grab our scroll bar on the right and go up to the top. And what we'll do is we'll make our own styles and we'll just put them up at the top of the web page so it's easy to find. So I'll click here after all these gray comments and hit my enter button a couple times and go up here and I'll create a new style and I'll call it .myHeader. And dot, of course, means a class. That refers to a class style, which is a general style that can be used over and over again. So I'll put .myHeader, I'll put a curly brace, a beginning curly brace, and then an end curly brace. And then I'll just simply put in, I'll tab in here, and I'll type in background dash color colon orange semicolon. Now, I only use the names of colors, all of the basic colors, the primary and secondary and tertiary, all those colors, you can actually write in the names of them, but this should just be for laying out a website. When you're actually doing the website design, you should use the hexadecimal codes, which will come up when you, if you place your mouse right after the colon, when you type in something like background color and hit your spacebar once, it will give you the pop-up code hinting, and you can double click on color, and then when you select a color in here, any color, well let's mix an orange, orange-ish, okay, and then you hit your enter button. Notice that it drops in the hexadecimal code for the color. these are what you should be using because these are universal across computers. So use those in your actual web design. When you see me actually typing the name of a color, it's just pure laziness, and because it's easier to type red or orange than to look this stupid number up. But that's just for layout, right? Okay, so what I've done is I've defined a new style called .myHeader. Once again, this is the name of the style, which is also referred to as a rule. It's a class, which is indicated by the dot, which means it's a general style. The curly braces tell you, okay, these are what the attributes of the style are going to be, and then this is the actual attribute, background color. The colon means equals, and then this is the hexadecimal code. This is orange, and this semicolon which ends it. So I've defined a style there, .myHeader. Now I can go back to the source code page, and I can go into this div right here, which already has a class assigned to it, and I can put my cursor right after the end of that class, but before the end quotes, hit my space bar, and then just type myHeader. You see in this little drop-down menu, it actually finds the header, right? Now you don't have to put the dot here. The word class refers to the dot. So even though this has a dot on the bootstrap.css page, that just means it's a class. So, you know, by virtue of the fact that we say class here, that the dot is implied. So somewhere on that style sheet, there's a class, a style called dot call -lg-12. Now there's myHeader is also included in the classes that are being called for this div. So all those styles apply to this div. So you notice that this now changed to that orange color. So once again, there's a container here on this page, which is wrapping around everything. Then there's a row inside of that container, which is what's going across here. And then inside of that row is yet another div, which is nested inside of the row, which just has two classes applied to it. This first class, which makes it go all the way across all 12 divisions of the div as set up by Bootstrap, and the myHeader style, which gives it the orange background. Okay, so now we're ready to drop in some content. So we'll click right here in between the beginning and end div tags, and we'll drop in a responsive image. So once again, we'll go over here to our insert tag. We'll come down here and we'll click on responsive image default. It will put a bunch of code in there, and it will put in a big gray responsive image. Now, this gray image here is what's called a placeholder, and because it just holds the place of your final image. And it puts in a bunch of code which tells you where this placeholder image is, right? Now, if I went ahead and just said file save, what it does is it takes this image here and it makes a copy of it in our images folder. So let's see if that's actually the case. So we open this files menu up, open images folder. Sure enough, you see this thing, image responsive. It copied that in there so that it can use it whenever we want to put in a placeholder image. So it's gone ahead and dropped this image in. It's got a class of image-responsive, which will make it a responsive image. And now all we have to do is change it from whatever it's pointing to, which is this gray image here, to our actual header image. Now there's a couple different ways you could do that. One of the easiest ways would be to just type in the name of the new image down here in this section where it's looking for the image. But I'll show you an even easier way, because why not go with the easiest way, right? So what we'll do is we'll go up here to the Windows drop down at the top, click on Window, and then come down here and click on Properties. Now your Properties box is this box right here. It might come up at the top. You can drag it down to the bottom. This will let you change the properties of the web page. So you can see that we have this image tag selected, and img-src image source, and that's where the image is. And so right now it's pointing to this gray responsive placeholder. But what you can do is you can go down here to this source box right here, and you can click on this little file folder, and it will allow you to browse for a file. So instead of this responsive placeholder image, which is the gray image, let's click on this one called header and hit open. And now you see it replaces that placeholder image with our header image. It's got an orange background. Of course, it's not the right orange that goes with this, but you know, it looks a little better than the yellow probably would have. Okay, so now again is a good time to save. So we'll do file save. I save on a regular basis so I don't lose anything. Notice I just saved this page. I didn't do save all, which is actually a better idea. Save all, and now the Bootstrap file got saved too. Okay, so this properties box gets a little bit annoying, so I'm just going to keep closing it when I'm not using it and reopen it. But now we can preview our page in a web browser, or we could even use the scrubber here to preview it here inside of Dreamweaver. So if I click the scrubber, you can see at full desktop size it's going to look like that. But we asked it to drop in the image and to make it a responsive image, which means it's linking to code which will make this image resize for us. So now if we click on the scrubber and we start resizing the web page, notice the image is resizing too. So if we go down here to tablet size, it resizes like that, or we go down here to phone size, it resizes like that. So this image is looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got ourselves a little header there. All right, now the next thing we need to do is we've got, once again, we've got our container, we got a row going across the top, which is this right here, and then inside there we've got a div which is holding an image. Okay, so that's great for the first row. Now what do we want to do next? We want to put in a navigation system. Now it occurs to me that this would be a good time to show you the original Photoshop file and what it looked like. I probably should have shown you that at the beginning, but the vast majority of you have been in the class and seen what we've done the last couple of weeks. But I'll go ahead and bring that file up and we can take a look at it just to see what it looked like, because of course your job is going to be taking your Photoshop mock-ups and reconfiguring them a little bit so they'll work with this bootstrap layout, and then cutting up your images in Photoshop and building a bootstrap template like this, and then dropping your images in as responsive images so that they can resize. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at that Photoshop file. So let me go ahead and switch over to Photoshop, and we'll look at Neha's original mockup. Okay, so we're here in Dreamweaver, and I said we were going to go over to Photoshop and take a look at Neha's original Photoshop mockup. So we'll jump over here to Photoshop. This is not quite her original mockup. She had some social media up here, some social media icons, which I turned off just to make it a simpler build of this website. So this was her original mockup, my social media. And what I did first was in Photoshop, I created a new layer on top of this, put a white background on it, and then drew some lines on it to create this overlay. And I'll go ahead and take the opacity on this up so you can see what it is. So what I did was I basically mapped out the different divs that I would have to create in order to create this website. So if I take the transparency up a little bit on this, you can see that there's one div that goes all the way around it, this outer one, which is the container. Then there's the header div up here, which we just built, the navigation bar div, and then there's two divs each for each of these sections in the middle. The div on the left would contain the picture, the one on the right, the text in each of these three cases, and then of course the div at the bottom, which I would just refer to as the footer. Okay, so that's what I did. I just, like I said, I created a new layer in Photoshop and gave it a white background, and then just used red to draw out these boxes. And I asked you guys to do that with your websites too, with your website mockups, and also to please consider reformatting your websites so they can work in this kind of a layout, so that it'll be easy for you to get this bootstrap site done. So the next thing I did after creating that was I just went ahead and put a new layer in here. I called it sections, and what I did was I just put the names of everything, or the names that I would choose to give things. So of course the container goes all the way around. The header's that box we did at the top. The nav bar would be the navigation bar. And then I just named these boxes C1 and C1A because it was just easy to connect them together like that. C stands for content for me. You could name these anything you like. And of course I named the one at the bottom the footer. Okay, so that's the Photoshop mockup. That's sort of like our game plan. We had the original Photoshop mockup, then we sort of divided it up into sections and gave them names, and now we can use these names to actually create styles or classes which will apply to each one of these. So notice that we created a style called my header, which refers to this header. We could create something called my nav bar. We could create my footer, C1, C1A, and so on and so forth. Okay, So we'll go back to Dreamweaver here. We won't spend any more time with this Photoshop file, I don't think, except to say one thing, which is that what I've done is Nihal had these original pictures here, and what I've done is I've changed those to other pictures of the Buddha that I thought would work better, that were wider, that would work better in this type of a layout. So let me see if I can show those to you real quick. If I go back into Photoshop here. Oh, I'm in Photoshop. Okay, so that was easy. I'm in Photoshop. Okay, so we'll go to File, we'll go to Open, and we'll just go look in this Documents folder where I have the images that are in the Images folder in the Bootstrap site that I'm having you guys download from the website. And that'll just show you what these images look like. So once again, if I go down here to my Documents folder and I open up the Bootstrap site and I open up the Images folder, and let me click here on this little icon so we can see the pictures. And you'll see that they're just three pictures of Buddha imagery. Well, of course it could not show it to us, which would be just great. Let me click on this one. Maybe it'll show it to us in this view. Okay, you can see that's, there's a picture of a Buddha with sort of leaves behind him. And then here, so if I go Buddha 1, there's that picture, and then Buddha 2 is just sort of like a Buddha statue, and Buddha 3 is once again another Buddha image. But I just got wider images because I think they'll work a little better with the resizing of this when it gets down to be like phone size and everything. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of that. Okay, so like I said, we can refer back to this Photoshop image if we want to in the future. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to Dreamweaver, and we're going to start the process of building the navigation bar, those C1 through C3 containers, and the footer at the bottom. But what we're going to do is we're going to do those in another video, because I have to keep these videos under an hour, otherwise YouTube, where I upload them to, doesn't like me very much, and it won't accept them. So we're going to do one more video, and so I'll go ahead and close this one out, and then we'll start up the new one, which will do the rest of the stuff we need to do to create this website.